Hey everyone, George here, and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about one of my very favorite cleanup fish, the Otocinclus. This is an essential fish for anyone who has multiple tanks or has a larger tank. If you want a good cleanup crew for algae, these guys are absolutely incredible algae eating little machines. And we're going to talk about their care. We're going to talk about how many of them I think you should have per tank. And we're going to talk about the benefits of these fish in your aquarium. So hang in there with me and we'll be right back. Hey everybody, George here, and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about one of my very favorite cleanup crew fish, and that is the Otocinclus. That would be this guy right here on the rock here. Now there are approximately 6 or 7 of these in the tank. I don't remember how many I have. Typically in a 20-gallon like this, I like to keep a minimum of 5, but also 6 or 7 will actually be best, because the larger the school of these, the healthier and better that they do. They do like to school with other fish of their kind, and they are essential to the cleanliness of your tank. Now, if you look behind you here at these Moresso balls, which have been in here for almost 2 years, they're in perfect shape because they're groomed by these fish. Now when we come back, we're going to talk about specifically the Otocinclus, but we're also going to talk about why it is essential that you have cleanup crew fish in your tank that are going to help keep your tank healthy. So when we come back, we're going to hit that, and we're going to talk about these little guys, and I hope you'll hang in there. We'll be right back. So I am not going to be on camera much today because I'm going to focus a lot on these fish. Now if you look over here at the wall of this tank, you're going to see there's a gathering of, I think there's about 4 or 5 of these Otocinclus just in this small area right here. Now like I said, they tend to group together as the lights come on. They will tend to do that, and then as the day wears on, they will disperse and they will go to work on keeping your plants clean, your rocks, your wood, and other parts of the aquarium where they find algae that will sustain them. You know, you have to have a certain amount of algae or these fish will not do well. So if you've got a really clean tank like I do, it's probably because these guys are doing a really good job and you're keeping them healthy by subsidizing them with other foods. Now if you look back in this area here, you're going to see these little guys swimming around and they're eating off these plants right in this area over here, and you've also got them gathered up over here as well. Now Otocinclus are a South American species. They are part of the Amazon basin, and they are found in schools of sometimes up to 1,000 to 10,000 at a time. So they are very, very social catfish, and they are part of the catfish family. I didn't mention that earlier, but they are part of the catfish family. Now, people buy these fish and they don't look at them very closely. The most important thing that you're going to look for when you're buying this particular fish, more than anything else that you're looking at, is you're going to look at their belly as they gather on the glass. Now, I don't have one gathering on the glass. I'm going to try to find one that is and show you sometime during this video, but I'm going to show you how important it is that their stomachs are nice and plump because if you get these fish and you're not paying attention to that, in other words, you're not paying attention to the health of these fish, you can get them and put them in your tank and find that within a day or two they are pretty close to being gone because they are unhealthy in the first place, and they never really, by the time the shock of putting them in a new tank and getting them settled in, they just don't have enough food to eat. Now, as you can see, there's one down in here, right in this area, and he's working on that plant, keeping that plant nice and clean. And that's exactly what you want. If you want good looking plants like I have in these tanks, and got a little something eating on a couple of these little Nubius petite nanas in here, and I have a sneaking suspicion that it might be my pleco in here, which is not supposed to really do that. I don't typically see the albino bristlenose or the standard bristlenose doing that kind of damage to plants. But what will happen, as I was mentioning, if you do not have enough to feed them, in other words, if there's not enough algae content in your tank, then they will go after things like that. Now, I'm going to tell you how to subsidize these fish to make sure they're healthy, because what's going to happen is these fish are going to really be healthy based on the amount of food that they get. Now, they process food very quickly. So in other words, I'm not trying to be gross or anything here. I'm trying to not say things that I don't want to say, but if you look at these fish and you watch their behavior, they're basically constantly eating. That's what they do. And they're grooming and constantly working on the plants in your tank. And that is what keeps your plants in really, really good shape. So if you watch these particular fish, they will be constantly, like I said, grooming your plants and keeping them in really, really beautiful shape. Again, it is so important that you subsidize their diet, because they don't always get enough food, and if they go downhill and you're not paying attention, they will go downhill very quickly, and it will be extremely hard to get them back. Once they quit eating, in other words, if there's not a food supply for them and they quit eating, then their stomachs will shrink down and they will not start eating again, and it is only a matter of days before you'll see that these fish are not in good shape. Now, if you look at these guys over in this corner over here, let me move my camera lens over that way just a little bit. I don't like seeing the edge of glass because it doesn't make for the best photography, but in this case here, we're going to have to play that game a little bit. As you watch these guys go up and down the tank, you may see one land on the front of the glass here, and that will be our opportunity to look at their bellies to see that they're nice and round and full, because if they are, that is a sign. You see this? You see that, how plump and full the bellies of these fish are? That's because they're getting a proper diet. And this kind of behavior where they glass like this is really a resting behavior, number one. Number two, it is because they like, when the lights first come on, to get a sense of where they are in the tank, and by doing that, they will slowly break off into small groups and just start, like I said, working the tank area. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I want to talk about this a little bit more as we go around to different tanks in my gallery here, and we watch the behavior of these fish, because, as I said, it is essential. If you look down here at this guy, right here, all of these guys are just grooming the leaves of these plants. Now, Otocinclus will not eat your plants. They will not eat your plants. So if you have live plants in your tank, which I hope you do, but if you have live plants in your tank, you'll watch these guys and they will be constantly on the move. I mean, they must be burning a zillion calories because these fish are constantly on the move, grooming every leaf in the aquarium. And that is how I get my leaves and my plants to be so well groomed and so pretty because of two things. Number one, I do lots of water changes, and we've talked about that a zillion times. I don't want to get into that again today and say, yeah, I know he's driving that home again, but the bottom line is I like to mention that just about every video because it is so essential that you keep up on that. It doesn't take long. But if they have clean water, very pristine water, and a food supply, in other words, algae growth in the tank that is not the crazy kind of algae like hair algae or blackbeard algae, those kinds of things that you absolutely do not want in your tank, and you only have these algae that are either green algae that grow on your rocks or the diatom algae that is that brown algae that we continuously see. Regardless of how old our tanks are, that kind of algae is going to grow, but that is the kind of algae that these fish thrive on, and it is essential that you have a certain amount of that. And if you have a healthy aquarium, you are going to see a supply of that to keep the Otocinclus in your tank healthy. Now, we don't want the brown algae all over the leaves and the plants in our tank, but we also don't want it to go unchecked either, because if you don't have these Otocinclus in your tank, or another type of algae eater such as the Siamese algae eater or a bristlenose pleco or snails or mono shrimp, whatever it might be, or you can have a combination of all of those, it is essential that you make sure that you have a proper source of algae for them. Now, if you want to subsidize, when we come back, we're going to talk about that a little bit. Now, as I'm making this video here, I happen to notice something which is a little bit unfortunate and troubling to me because I don't lose fish very often, but I want to be honest with you, because if we're going to make videos and we're going to talk about things, we have to talk about life and death of fish. Now, I've had these albino fish in here for quite a while, and the problem is that they only have a certain lifespan to them, and unfortunately, as you can see just behind this guy, there is a dead fish in here, and that is a very rare thing that you'll see in my tanks because that just doesn't happen. Now, these 5 albinos have been in this tank, I can't even tell you how long, a couple of years at least, but some of these were a little older when I got them, so I don't know exactly what the lifespan is of an albino quarry, but I noticed that this guy was acting a little strange here over the last few days, and he probably died overnight, and it does not take long for the fish in the tank to start working on the body of that dead animal and sort of making a mess out of there. But you want to get that out of your tank as quick as you can and do a water change right after you pull a dead fish out, because once that gets into your tank, it's a very polluting thing, and you want to be extremely careful. Now, as you can see, we're going to move on to other things here. I'm sorry that happened while we had a camera on there, but I wanted to be, real about this because I'm not perfect. People look at my tanks and they say, oh my God, they're so beautiful and they're blah, 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 blah. The truth is there is a lot of truth to that, but the bottom line is that there is a atmosphere that goes on sometimes when you're looking at these tanks, of a tremendous amount of activity, and something like that could get overlooked. But I'm trying to be honest with you and show you that we do have a dead animal down here, and I need to get that out of here. But what we're talking about right now is this Otocinclus, which is this guy right here on the leaf of this plant here. These Otocinclus are probably some of the oldest ones that I have in my tanks. And as you can see, he's grooming this area right down in here. And in doing so, you can see how clean and beautiful these plants are. You could probably also see that since the last time I videoed this just a couple of weeks ago, we have another Otocinclus right up in here as well on this leaf here. Now again, this is a 20-gallon cube. There's probably 4 or 5 of these Otocinclus in here, and that is a good amount of fish to keep this tank clean and to keep these leaves and everything looking as beautiful as they are. You don't want to let that brown algae get out of control, because it will quickly take your tank into a really bad situation where the tank gets overrun by that stuff and the fish can't keep up on it, and then you got a mess on your hands. So there's a fine balance there. Now, one of the things I would tell you about a dead fish like this is going to create a problem in your tank of fish eating off them. And if you allow that to happen for any length of time, one of the things that will happen is there can be disease created by the death of that fish, and you want to get that fish out of there as quickly as you can. So as soon as I'm done filming, I'm going to make sure I get that animal out of the tank that has perished. And that's sad though, because I've had these 5, and as you can see, the other one's working on them, and these guys will cannibalize. They don't care if it's their own type or whatever. I mean, if it's a dead fish, to them it's just food. That's all it is. And it's sad to see that happen though, because like I said, I've had those 5 albino cories for a very long time, and he was acting kind of funny. I think he was an older fish, and he was acting kind of funny for a while there, and I was kind of concerned about him. And yeah, the unfortunate thing of losing a fish, it does happen, and so we've got to understand that there is a circle of life in all of these tanks. Now, something's kind of cool that you want to look at up here. When your tanks are healthy, they will produce flowers on some of the plants that are in your tank, and that's kind of what we've got going right here. Now, it almost looks like a peace lily, but this is a Nubius. This is a Nubius petite. It's not the petite nana, which is the smaller version. We do have some of that in here as well, mixed in, but the Nubius petite is mostly what we have in the center part of this island style tank here. And the Otocinclus that are in here that are constantly grooming, you see them over on this end over here, you see them up in here, they're all over the place in here. And in a healthy tank, those guys are going to survive and thrive as long as they have some food. Now we're going to get to the main part of the topic of this, of how to subsidize these fish's diet. Now what I like to do is go out and buy a zucchini or a piece of cucumber and cut it up into some small pieces, because they will thrive off that. You don't want to give them too much. You got to understand where the fine line is, because if you give too much of that, they're going to ignore the algae in your tank, and that is going to become secondary to them, and they're going to expect that piece of zucchini or cucumber or whatever you happen to put in the tank. They're going to expect that in their diet all the time, and they're going to ignore your algae. So you've got to be extremely careful not to allow that to happen, where you have so much subsidizing of their diet, that they ignore the main thing that they're in your tank for, and that is to eat the algae. When we come back, we're going to wrap it up a little bit here. I'm going to be on camera, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Otocinclus and their origins and where you might be able to find them at your store. Most stores carry these, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about where you might find these. And in the meantime, I'm also going to clean up that dead fish that's in here. That was a sad thing to wake up to this morning. I just noticed that as we were talking about this subject. But again, I was watching that fish for a couple of days and he was acting kind of funny. So 5 years to 7 years is probably the life expectancy of these Corydoras in the albino family. And I know that these have been in here at least a couple years. And 2 of the 5 that are in here were kind of old guys when I put them in here from another tank. So anyways, I'll take care of that and we'll come back and we'll wrap this video up. So again, what do I think of the Otocinclus as far as the importance of having them in your tank? I think they're absolutely an essential fish for your aquariums. If you have more than one aquarium, you need to kind of figure out how many per aquarium that you need in order to keep algae down. You're always going to have some kind of algae in your tank. These guys thrive off the annoying algae like the diatom algae, which is the brown stuff that gets on your leaves and your rocks and your substrate, depending on the kind of substrate that you have, where you can see it or you don't see it. And they're just absolutely essential. But there's some ground rules you have to have in keeping these fish, and I want to recap that. I know we talked a lot about this in the parts of the video here where we talked about the fish themselves. But number one, you want to keep them in a group here, a minimum of 5 to 7 in a 20-gallon, and then you can build them up from there in larger tanks. I would say if you have a 100-gallon tank, 12 to 15 of these guys are absolutely perfect for a tank that size, along with maybe a pleco, a couple of Siamese algae eaters, and of course a mono shrimp or some snails of some kind, either the memory snail or the nitrite snail. Now, as I've said in the past, nitrites do not do very well sometimes in the freshwater setting, but I have had friends that have been able to keep them for a very long time. But that's not the subject here today, so we're going to get back to the Otocinclus here. They need clean water. They absolutely have to have a clean environment. If you don't have a clean environment, these fish are not going to do well. So they also do not like a tremendous amount of competition for food as far as being subsidized for their food. So if you do get some wafers, I'll show you what I'm talking about with that. You get these kind of wafers right here, which I think are the best. Feed these at night when your autos are moving around and when your Siamese algae eaters are moving around. Your cories will benefit from these greatly too, because cories are not nocturnal, but they do move around in the evening and look for food, and this being fed in the evening is going to keep all your other fish away that are sleeping or resting, I should say, and this will benefit your Otocinclus as well as some of your other fish that you have. Keep a wide variety of foods around so that you also have other types of food that the Otos can have other than just algae, because they will eat off the bottom of your tank. They will forage around just like a cory does, or those kinds of fish as well. But their main job is to go around and clean the algae off the leaves, the rocks, the wood, and those kinds of things in your tank. Now, how good are they? I have literally taken a tank that has a problem with diatom algae and put 5 to 7 of them in maybe a 20 to 30 gallon tank, and within 2 days you would never know that that algae was ever around. That's how efficient they are. That's how efficient they are. Now you have to keep in mind, These guys are poop producers, man. They are going to foul up your tank because they eat a lot and they poop a lot. So you're going to have to keep water changes really something that is essential and something that is a real serious routine for you, because they are going to put a lot of waste in your water. They're going to keep your tank clean, but they're also going to foul up your water. So make sure that you are doing those water changes. Again, getting back to it, I like to do a quarter water change in my tank once a week, and at the end of the month, every tank that I have gets a 50% water change. Do not do a 100% water change in a tank. You will destroy your good bacteria in that tank and ruin the cycle. So be careful not to ever do that, or do that and clean a filter on top of it, because you will have a mess on your hands and you will lose fish. It really throws things out of balance, and the delicate fish in your tank are really going to have a problem. But for your autos to thrive and be successful in your tank, they need a food source. They're always going to have that, as long because algae is always growing somewhere in your tank, whether you can see it or you don't. It's because if you have these fish in there, the Otocinclus, they're not going to allow algae to get to a point where you're going to actually recognize it, unless it's a weird kind of algae that they don't eat, such as blackbeard or other kinds of stringy algae that are just not on their menu. So if you are keeping these fish, keep them healthy, keep them happy, they're going to keep your tank clean and they're going to make you happy as well. Thank you for joining me today. Hit the comments down below if you have any questions about these fish, and you maybe have something else you want to add to this. That's great. Leave it in the comments down below. Subscribe, hit that like, and also hit that bell up at the top there. That will tell you anytime I have a new video coming out. So thank you for joining me today, and we'll see you on the next one. This video is in memory of Lee McMillan. If you're having any kind of suicidal thoughts, depression, or anxiety, please call the hotline below. Thank you.